Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My Facebook fans. I told you the time is here. A little bit of technical difficulties. I was one thing about canceling, but the show must go on. So today, as I promised you, and we'll have a better recording later on, all throughout the week. But we're going to be interviewing Deputy Secretary Tanya Bradsher, and we want to start it right now. Here's my interview. Facebook friends. This is Tony Williams from Veterans Council of Veterans, and I'm really excited about introducing someone that I think that is amazing, has still continuing amazing things, even as she got out of the military. And when I was excited when she was going through the process, the grind of going through the nomination process, and finally she got confirmed. I was really excited, and I said, let me take my chance. Say, hey, can I interview Deputy Secretary? And I want to give you a heads up, Deputy Secretary Tanya Bradsher, and they said, sure. And I said, oh man. So I'm really excited about being here with her, and we have a good conversation. Tanya also kind of goes on both sides, of not only being the first Black woman to be held the position of Deputy Secretary of Veteran Affairs, but she's also the first woman. And so both of the great accomplishments. I know that that's not why she got the job. She got it because of her performance, like she's done since the beginning, since she's been in the military. And so I wanted to first give a quick introduction to Tanya. Tanya, of course, is a retired military officer, did over 20 years, made a lieutenant colonel in the public affairs world. And then when she got out the military, then she started, dabbling around in the political sphere, and finally found herself working for the VA, the chief of staff, and then she now is the deputy secretary, second highest person in the VA. That means after the secretary of VA, it comes her. I'm so excited here. So first of all, I want to introduce yourself, please, Tanya. Hi, say hello.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. It is an honor and a privilege, and I love your hat, retired, not expired. That, and of course, Army HUA.
Right,
But
right.
I can't stop myself.
Right.
But that is a great definition of our veterans, right? That the serving after the service is so vital. So appreciate all that you're doing and helping us communicate with veterans. Your voice is so important because we know veterans trust veterans.
Right.
And so it's so incredibly vital that while we at the VA, we can reach out and we can tell them about the PACT Act and we can tell them about coming in and getting the services that they benefit. But a fellow veteran breaks through that so much quicker because there's just a verified that comes with talking to another veteran. So I really appreciate all you're doing reaching out to veterans.
Yeah, I call it the embedded trust, right? The embedded trust. And what I want to do is just kind of like a three-part interview. So first part, I just want to know, I want to humanize you. I call it humanize because some people look at you and think you're like a robot, and all you do is just wake up and you just start working and going, but you're human. So first, I know you got a family. Can you just briefly tell us their names?
Sure. So I'll first start with I'm a fourth generation Army soldier. My dad was drafted for Vietnam. He didn't serve, but in Vietnam, but was drafted during the Vietnam era. And so I grew up, I spent 12 years at what is now Fort Liberty, Fort Bragg. So I lived on base, and then my parents were finally able to afford a house. And I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, went to Douglas Byrd Junior High, Mary MacArthur Elementary School, and then he blew out his knees. And so, which of course meant he was taken off of jump status after 11 years and went to Germany, and we moved back to Virginia. I was born in Arlington, Virginia, and we moved in with my grandfather and my grandmother. He was the conductor of the Army band. And so my mother grew up in a military family, and my dad ended up serving. So my grandfather is the longest serving conductor of the Army band. He served from 1948 to 1964. He actually led the procession for Kennedy's funeral, and that was the last thing that he did while on active duty. And so I've always had the military around me and absolutely was not going to join. Until what happened is I went off to college. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My dad sent me there because it was the best school I got accepted to. And when I came back, my parents went through the divorce. And I really had a hard time adjusting And everyone likes to say, well, it's so much easier when you're older and your parents divorce. I submit that it's never easy when a divorce happens. And I was dating a really nice guy. He asked to get married, and blow up, I got married. And that was a very, very soon was not the right decision for me. And my mom drove me to the recruiters. And she said, we did not send you to college to live the life that you're living. You need to go talk to that Army recruiter. You need to go get your commission. And I ended up being a 90-day wonder. I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then went to officer candidate school. And the whole idea was to basically just kind of figure out my life. And ended up getting divorced very early, about 2 years, we're only married, and went off and started as an AG. So for those that aren't Army personnel, I did personnel in the Army, and met this guy named Tanya Bradsher, who was a captain. We met in Seoul, Korea. Korea was my first duty assignment. I have a love affair with being assigned in Korea. I actually served 6 years of my 20 in Korea. We did 1 year, then we did a second year. And then from there, ran MEPS, was a test control officer back when those were still on active duty. John and I ended up getting married, and then we moved back to DC. And I was able to do personnel for what's called, it's now the Defense Information School. Back then it was called AFIS. And so basically I was doing personnel for public affairs. And while in Korea, I also was a detachment commander for what was AFKN, we now call AFN Korea.
Right.
And so with that, I've always done between public affairs and AG, and ended up from there being at the Pentagon and being a joint staff intern. And I went to the Pentagon in July, and the year's important because it was 2001. So from July to September 10th of 2001, I lived a very, I would dare to say, cush life of being a joint staff intern, where I listened to really smart people brief. And then 9/11 happened. I was in the Pentagon for 9/11, and that changed everything. I went from being a trained public affairs officer, who was actually pregnant at the time with our second daughter. I had our first daughter a couple of years prior. And
one second, just so keep it. I want to make it a little more humanized. I heard a lot of transactional stuff, but so what branch was your husband in when he met you?
He was military intelligence.
Oh, so was I. Okay.
Yeah.
So we got the same background, but this is not my show. This is not my interview. We got the same background. So in military intelligence, okay.
Yeah.
And you had when did you have your children?
So 1999 is our first daughter.
What's her name?
Charlotte. Our second daughter I had in 2002. Her name is Catherine. And then we had our third daughter. I was actually in Korea again because we went back as a family, and we had Christine in 2005. So I'm the mother of a 24-year-old, a 21-year-old, and an 18-year-old.
All women.
All girls.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So my husband is one of 11. He has 8 sisters.
Wow. What a man. Okay, let's go back to that. So back to that military grind. Okay, so
Sure. So 9/11 happened, and of course, as we all did, we all just stepped up. You know, we worked every single day, 12-hour shifts. I worked day shifts. My husband was working night shifts. And then on October 7th was the first meal that we shared together, because we just kind of saw each other on the walkway from the Pentagon. And from there, it just, we just worked. We worked hard. And so we did a couple of years there, and then went to Korea in 2003, went for a 2-year assignment. And then at that time they had AIP, which was basically do a 3rd year in order to stabilize. So we did that. And then John came out on the command list. And so we ended up having to do a 4th year. That was probably a little too long, to be brutally honest, but it was great. And then from Korea.
What unit did John command?
So he ended up being G2 it's the unit that has all of West United States. So when we came back from Korea, he was at Fort Carson, and I was the public affairs officer for 2 BCT 4ID, and he went to Division West. Sorry, that's what it was. And so he was the G2 trainer that went around the country to certify all the units as they were getting ready for deploy. This is all 2008 to 2007 to 2009 is when we were at Carson. I deployed from 08 to 09.
I want to talk about something here that you're talking about that people don't know, that are not listening, may not know about. You were what they call a dual military.
Yeah.
And how did you guys navigate that? Being dual military, and he was doing his career, and you were doing your career. What's the secret that we can learn?
So I don't know if it's a secret because quite frankly, it's really hard. I don't, a lot of my peers, especially as lieutenant to captain, women peers ended up getting out. They married a service member a lot, but they ended up not staying in. And so that's where I saw a lot of my peers when they started having families, particularly. For dual military, the challenge is, especially as you get more senior, as a captain, it's not too complicated. But once you get to feel great, it gets very complicated. And one has to be the lead dog. And it's really hard because chances are both of you are type A, go get them, hard charging personalities
Right.
that just want to excel and do well, and to take an assignment that hits the box, but not the top box that you could. It's really challenging. And, it's definitely, one of the reasons why I served 20 and John went on to serve 30. It was, and as we got more senior, we prioritized our family in making sure that we stayed together as a unit. And part of that was, the stressors of deployment were real for us. And we were very, very challenged. It got very ugly for a while. So I don't want to sugarcoat it and say that it was always lovely, because that's not real. Don't let everybody's Instagram post think that, it was all glorious, because how many of your peers have you already seen? You have this great couple, right? They're going through, and then all of a sudden on Instagram, they got two separate accounts and they aren't following each other anymore, right? And you're kind of like, huh? And they just do it while they're married, or while they're still in the service. And so, checking in and really figuring out and having hard conversations, and sometimes, it's pulling your marriage out of the dumpster fire, right? Like
Real talk.
like you have to, nitty gritty. And so that is where John and I determined that we prioritized our kids, we prioritized each other. And, I had a very good career, but it was time to separate in order for me to advance. Army they wanted me to go back out. And I was like, you know what? My girls are finally stable. And John has a phenomenal path. And I did communications, so I have a skill that I can transition into either the federal side or corporate side, or continue. And so that is why I decided to do 20. John went on and did 30. So I retired in 2013 and he retired in 2018. And
I wanted to. You had mentioned about you being a military brat. Sound like,
yeah,
and I'm a military brat too. So, and one of the things that we don't realize is from the kids is how they develop.
yes.
I think that's one of the things that, we're three daughters. I mean, I'm sure that you're aware of that piece. Like, okay, they grew up kind of different, so sometimes they don't feel like they connect. Sometimes, did you find that out with your three daughters?
What I found was they were very adaptable.
Okay.
I could throw my kids pretty much anywhere and they could figure it out.
Right.
But the challenge, going back to the deployment, one of the challenges is one of my daughters has special needs.
Okay.
And we didn't know that when I first deployed. And it was something that came out as she got older. And one of the other reasons too was wanting to really take an opportunity to focus on her and make sure that she had all the resources that she needs. And I'm incredibly proud of her because she's in college, working through dyslexia, which is really, really hard, working through ADHD, which is really, really hard. I think that she built a resiliency through having those special challenges, but also because she's a military child and had to just figure it out on the playground, and then be on a new playground, right? I mean, because it's not like she grew up. Now, what they were able to do, and my last one, she was pretty much steady Eddie. She got to go through the same group of kids, high school, because she was our last one. The oldest in the middle had more transition and spent more time as a military child than the other two. So, but it does. I will say that our deployments, because I deployed, John went to war college, then he deployed. Those were a hard time, and that was part of the decision for me on being able to provide like a consistent parent for my girls. So that's what I focused on.
Thank you. Reason why I asked those questions, because that's one of the things, and you'll hear later on, that when you're in the military, you have support when it comes to special needs. Kind of, and that's a challenge. You don't get it once you get out of the military, and then something else happens. But it's important that people understand how much sacrificing that the soldiers, when they have dual military, those sacrifices that you had to make. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience knew that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then you decided to, you got out in 20 years, and John sit there and, he finished up, he said 30 years.
Yeah, he did 30.
So what happened after that? And tell me some of the nuance, because it's not like you just fell into stuff, right? You just didn't fall into these jobs.
No, so what kind of set my career in this really unique trajectory is I came out of Iraq and I went to the Pentagon, and I ended up being a desk officer for Southcom, which included Guantanamo Bay. And so it was a very high profile portfolio. And so for Gitmo, I ended up flying back and forth to Cuba, which is really challenging. And this goes back to the family piece, because John was deployed that first year. So I have my husband in Iraq. I'm flying back and forth to Cuba. The linchpin of how I got through the deployment and how I got through the remainder of my career is my mom.
Oh, right.
My mom gave up her entire career, not a job, her career, in order to move in with me. And part of that is she's a military, former military spouse, military child, mom of Army, and she determined that when I deployed, she moved in with us. And when the plan was that she would, go back to her life, but then John was deployed, and then I was going back and forth to Cuba. And so she stayed with us. And, I would not have the career that I have if it wasn't for my mother. And I know everybody isn't blessed to have a mother who can drop everything, move in, and really become that third parent. And she gave up a lot. She gave up her career, and she gave up being grandma, because she also had to do the hammer. And she,
right?
Because you just can't be grandma who's going out and giving ice cream. And that's what she was doing up until then. Because trust me, I was like, why is there like ice cream? But so with that, I was Guantanamo Bay. We ended up being sued. And with that, I worked for the general counsel, who was this guy you may know named Jay Johnson, who is the general counsel right now, as well as the assistant secretary of public affairs. His name was Doug Wilson. So we were navigating the lawsuit. We changed our ground rules, and that kind of gave me some visibility. And the reason that's important is I will tell you, of all the jobs that I had, that was the one I disliked the most. I was upset that I wasn't the Iraq desk officer. I thought, I still have like dirt in my boots from Iraq. Why are you making me the Guantanamo Bay desk officer? But because, and my motto has always been like, whatever the job is, just do your best, do your best, do your best. And with that, I actually got to spend a lot of time with Jay Johnson and ended up becoming his full-time public affairs officer. So I took over, I had his detainee affairs, but I took over his entire account. And then Doug Wilson actually nominated me to go to the National Security Council, because folks don't really know that about 75% of the folks who serve in NSC are details. They're details from State Department, from the Department of Defense, from CIA, from FBI, like all the agencies contribute to make the National Security Council. So I was detailed over to the White House my last 2 years, where I had to wear civilian clothes, did not know how to do that, where I actually grew my hair out because I always kept it super short while I was on active duty, and where I, had to be nimble and write press releases and coordinate with the White House and work through all of that. That was actually where I determined I was going to retire. So I hit year 19 and then I hit year 20. And so I had just decided, okay, it is time. I'm going to get a job. And I wasn't at that point even thinking that I had an option to stay at the White House, that because I was a detail. And so what ended up happening as folks realized that I was retiring, different appointments and trying to do taps and all of that, which I did not do a good job at. Just want to be very candid. I rushed through it, which I should not have, my biggest regret. So I ended up, Valerie Jarrett, I put my name in the hat to be the outreach coordinator for veterans, military families, and wounded warriors. Valerie Jarrett interviewed me and I got the job. And that's how I became what was a political appointee. I didn't fully understand at the time what that meant, that if you serve in an administration, a position in the White House, that you became a political appointee. I wasn't savvy enough. I have no regrets, but I didn't fully comprehend what I was doing.
It's so interesting how there are certain things that happen in your life you can't map out. You can't sit down 3 years from now and map all that out. That's what you just said there. There's a lot of happens, God, I call it God assignments or whatever. But at any rate, so let's start. I know I got not much more time. I want people to know who you are. I want to know that you that some of the stuff, humanize you. You're not a robot. We're not robots. So you find yourself, and what would you find as you go into the nomination process? Did you ever want to give up? And what kept you going?
I came over to VA. I actually started back at NSC, the beginning of the administration, and I really wanted the opportunity to work with, before he was Secretary, Dennis McDonough. I worked for him when I was on active duty. Serving as his chief of staff was a phenomenal opportunity. And quite frankly, if that had been the end of it, I would have been totally fine. But then when Deputy Secretary Remy decided it was time for him to leave the administration, being the Deputy Secretary was the one job that I thought, okay, if I'm going to go through the confirmation process, this is the one job I want to do it for. And it's a very laborious process. And so what kept me motivated was just really VA employees who were so kind to me and just grab my hand and say they're praying for me, and fellow veterans who were excited to see a woman in the role, other veterans that I've served with who'd reach out and just say, it's really good to see a 9/11 generation veteran in the seat as we're looking at the PACT Act. And so that's what really kept me motivated during, the challenging times. And I just, you have to give it to God. You have to, for me, it's, if this is meant to be, it's meant to be. And I just had to release it and just do everything, answer the questions, study hard, and continue at that time still being chief, because I still had a full-time job. It wasn't as if you get the opportunity just to quit your day job while you're going through the confirmation process.
So one thing I do want to mention, because one of the things that we, the Veterans Council, we're really focusing on is military sexual trauma, and we're really in the post-vention side, not on the prevention side. So can you tell us some of the things that you think that the VA is doing that's really helping these unfortunate people with military sexually assaulted come into the to transition world? What are the VA doing that you think they need to know?
So I think first and foremost, we need to have the conversation. The veterans who are sexual assault, sexual harassment, and rape victims, it is so hard to have those conversations. And we at VA have the counselors who are able to help with treatment, making sure that as you are filling out your VA forms for benefits, that you put that information down. It is safe for us to know that. We will protect you, we'll protect your privacy. And we have culturally competent counselors who are able to assist our veterans and be able to help them through the counseling. But it's really when the time is right to have those hard conversations. So we want to be, I think VA is equipped to take care of veterans in ways that no one else is. And it is really hard and raw to discuss the darkest, potentially secrets or challenges that a veteran has ever endured, male or female, right? We know that it happens to both. What I have witnessed is, even in group settings, when one veteran is brave enough to share, other veterans are brave enough to share. And I never want a veteran to hold in or to suffer in silence. And so I think it's so vital for them to seek treatment. We have the counselors available in order to be able to help them with that treatment.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One thing I do want to point out that we're having our third conference in April and we're focused on families, the healing relationships. So the people we got the veteran piece, but then we also got the family that suffers as well. We mentioned family so important. But in closing, got like a minute. In closing, one thing I want to mention this, I want to make sure I'm on time. I want anybody to say,
No, I appreciate it. So first and foremost, any veteran who is not connected to the VA, I encourage you to please apply for your benefits. If you haven't been making your VA appointments for healthcare, I need you to get those scheduled. We want to make sure that you have all the resources that you need. We also have other additional programs. There's VA home loans, there's education opportunities, there's certifications that you qualify for, and there's also wonderful VA for life, which is whole life insurance, which is so incredibly important. I buried my father. I thought he had life insurance. He didn't. And so what ended up happening is, as a captain, I spent $10,000 on a credit card to bury my dad. What I now have, because I've applied for the VA life, which it doesn't matter if you're 0% disabled or 100% disabled, you are able to apply, and it literally takes 10 minutes. And you can determine if you want $40,000, $30,000, $20,000, or $10,000 for your family when you pass away, and your rate is locked in when you apply. So that same amount, and it comes automatically out of your benefits. So it doesn't matter if you're incapacitated, if you stop paying. Unfortunately, that's what happened with my father. He stopped paying for his insurance policy. I have peace of mind, and I want all veterans to have peace of mind that when I pass away, my girls will not have the financial burden of burying me. And we have that because VA has a wonderful insurance program. It's only a year old. And so I just highly recommend that if you're looking for insurance, please take a look at what VA has for you.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time out to speak to this, to the audience. And I think, as we were going up between Black History Month and Women's History Month, I think you make a bigger impact on Women's History Month. I appreciate all you've done. I wish you great success. Let me know if I can help you out as best I can. But until then, thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary.
Thank you for all you're doing for our veterans and staying in touch and communicating. We are so appreciative. And if you need anything else, please circle back with us.
I appreciate it.
All righty. Take care.
I appreciate all. So there you go. I interviewed with Deputy Secretary Tanya Bradsher. And again, it's in observance of Women's History Month. And I think she definitely deserved that. I also want to, we mentioned before, I mentioned before I leave, that we are having our event again. It's going to be 5th and 7th of April. We're going to be having our third annual Military Sexual Trauma Conference. And, this is different. This conference is different because we're focusing more on the families, because families are affected more than people realize. And there's not much services out there for them. So if you have a child or a spouse, or even a girlfriend, boyfriend, they're affected when you've been either sexually assaulted, PTSD. So we want to address that at our conference. So we're asking you to please share this event. And to, you never know, you may save a life. You may save a life, because this is about healing relationships and families. Again, 5-7 April at the USF Joint Military Leadership Center. I put the Eventbrite link in the chat. I'll do it again for those who may have not got it. And then, so anyway, thank you very much. See you next week as we start getting ready for our conference. It's called Roll to the Conference. Until then, this is Tony Williams. Have a good day. But first, I have to have my outro.